Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome back to the AR-15 podcast. Tonight we're going to be going through with episode number 221. And we have with us Graham Rasmussen from
Staley Shooting Supply.
Staley Shooting Supply.
Tough one.
All right. And we're going to be talking about today's trends and the AR side of the firearms industry and how those trends are evolving in our builds. So, JD, why don't you tell the folks about our exciting Patriot Patch collaboration so that we can get T-shirts, patches, and stickers to everybody that has an interest.
So we put together with Ryan Cross and Jacob. But we got together with them and did a limited run of shirts, patches, and stickers for the AR-15 podcast. We're already kicking around ideas for our next shirt. I think it should be a picture of Reed's face on the front and says, "Does this make you salty?" I think it'd be a big seller. I mean, I know at least I'd buy like 5 or 6 just so I could have one for each day of the week and then on the 7th day rest. But we got together. We did a shirt to promote the podcast, selling them through the Patriot Patch Company. Every shirt sold, we get a kickback to help us out with our SHOT Show coverage this year. So check those out. There is a link at firearmsradio.tv. Click on the AR-15 podcast. Also, if you go to the show notes of episode 221, you can find the link right there to pick up a shirt, patches, or stickers. And thanks to those who've already ordered those and helping us out. So that's one of the ways you can help us. We have other ideas coming in the future. Right now, we're just kind of getting back to having fun and talking about NFA items all the time, nonstop.
You know, I think that's exciting. We will be the CNN of the NFA world.
We
24 hours CNN style NFA news.
I only know that Anderson Cooper's on. So if I'm Anderson Cooper, what's the other guy, the British guy that they kicked off and sent back to Piers Morgan? You can be Piers Morgan. I'll be Anderson Cooper.
Yay. No, that's not going to work.
Also want to give a shout out to SX3 podcast that Graham's a part of. Stephanie and Graham, and then Carl and Stan. Am I missing anybody else, Graham?
No full timers. There's a lot of part timers, but yeah,
There's
no, it's
a lot
about
of part timers.
Yeah.
So it's Stephanie and Graham from Staley Shooting Supply, and then Stan and Carl from the Gun Dudes, which is the first gun related podcast that I started listening to and got me to actually reach out and say, "Hey, Reed, do you want a redheaded ogre to join your team?" And he said yes. So I'm actually a Stan fanboy. Stan taught me the most vital thing in life, and because of him, I have really improved my napping game. I've been able to go to sleep anywhere possible. So I look forward to one day meeting the man face to face. So
we'll make that happen.
I'm a big fan of the SX3 podcast, so check him out too.
Oh, thanks, man.
So, Graham, how have you been this week?
I have been busy this week. For sure. Good, but busy. Yeah.
So tell us, how is the AR firearms side of the industry? Is it doing well? Is everything in good shape?
Everything seems to be in good shape. Everything is shaping up, honestly, as far as we're concerned anyways. I don't know if about industry-wide, but in our market, things are looking good. Yeah.
That's excellent. So we've invited Graham to talk about some things related to his involvement in the firearms industry. But before we do that, Graham, tell us, what have you personally been doing in the firearms world as far as you and your desire to shoot?
Ooh, recently been trying to build a few guns, build a couple of ARs, trying to get a couple of guns up to speed. I carry every day. I got a little experience of about 5 weeks ago now, probably. My 6-year-old learned how to read, and we're walking into a building with a "no firearms permitted on the premises" sticker on the door. And we walk in, and right in front of the security guard, he says, "Hey, Dad, how come you can't bring your gun in here?" Shut up for a second. Let's go see the dinosaurs.
That's great. That is hysterical.
Yeah,
you
it's
got
pretty good.
it.
Oh, you love them. And we tried to exit the building as quick as possible. Oh, it's good.
So I'm taking my son to a father-son camp retreat this weekend. He's 6. Told him that we were gonna take some fishing tackle and poles so we could do some fishing. And apparently they sell a rocket casting fishing rod that doesn't actually look like a fishing rod.
Right?
So that's what I have to buy him for him to consent. I have to buy him what is essentially a toy.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I don't have that problem.
Yeah,
My
well,
6-year-old to go anytime I want, go on the boat. He always tells me how he outfishes me and everything. So
all right. So, JD, what have you been up to?
Not much, man. Working on some stuff for the show to get guests coming on. We've got great suggestions by you guys. If you guys have a suggestion that you'd like to see, somebody you'd like us to reach out to, hit us with an email, ar15.podcast@gmail.com. That's ar15.podcast@gmail.com. And we've got several things lined up. Some NFA, some not NFA. So should be some good shows coming up in the future.
Outstanding. Well, so since I'm sure you're very interested, JD, I've been out to my deer lease this last weekend. Had a little time to myself to do some work on the lane and just kind of reflect out in nature. It was a nice, peaceful weekend.
I was actually quite concerned about you, Reed, because you sent me pictures, I believe, Friday night. And these were, you said they were moths, but I'm pretty sure they were small, like pterodactyls. I mean, these things were massive. I was worried Reed was going to get carried away by these Texas-sized moths that you had out there. All of a sudden, I'm sitting with my wife watching a movie, and this big picture pops up on the screen of this moth that looks like Godzilla.
Well, the moth literally was as wide as the from stem to stern, as long as the palm of, or the width of the palm of my hand, and its wings would cover up from the heel to the fingertip. So it was about that big. It was a pretty big sized moth.
that's awesome.
And it was moving fast. It was hard to get a good picture of it, but yeah, it was huge. But when I was out there, I had a chance to sight in my deer rifle. I shoot a 243 Remington 700, and then I got a chance to pull out a Mauser that I recently acquired. What is it? It's a Turkish. I think it's a Turkish M38 Mauser, and so that was kind of nice. 8mm. Took it out to 100 yards. Open sights, JD. And so I was dinging some steel out there. It was good.
Did you use iron sights on your other sight-in project?
Go on my 243?
Yeah.
No, it's got a scope on it.
See, you just led me down.
No, wait a minute. I bought that thing secondhand, and it didn't have sights. They'd removed the front side post and the rear sight. So what can I do?
I figured you'd have like a magic iron sight wand or something to wave over it.
Yeah. Call me Gandalf, the backup iron sight wizard, right?
I was going to go for like a wizard from Harry Potter, but sure, we'll go with Gandalf.
All right, fine. All right. So, I think we can safely move on to the main topic. And why don't we kind of unpack this a little bit for everybody? So I have consistently been building rifles since I started the podcast. And so I've got 3 under my belt here in the last couple of months. And JD just started building rifles in the last, how long has it been, JD?
Like 3 weeks.
Yeah. So, and I think JD really wanted Graham to come on and verify for all of the listeners that he has in fact acquired parts.
Right.
Not that Graham can swear to the fact that they've been put together, because I kind of suspect that they've been just stuffed into a barely empty section of your gun safe, JD, so that you can start hoarding the components to finish rifles. But
Well, here's the thing. He ordered them from me, but I know he has a problem with them, so I've been holding on to them. I haven't even shipped them yet, right?
Oh my
I'm holding
God.
on to them to make the problem worse.
I'm getting a parts intervention. But I did. I wrote Stephanie and Graham and said, all right, I need to put some of these together. And we went through the path. And so in the next, I'm thinking October is going to be a pretty busy month putting some rifles together. One of them a little bit more intricate and more custom to what I wanted to do with it. And then the other two just kind of getting a base and then seeing how it's going to work out and improving it as we go. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, all that being said, I think the purpose that I wanted to accomplish tonight is to kind of just talk about, some of the thoughts that we had when we used to build rifles, the thoughts that go through our minds when we're building them today, what we think about that angle in the future. And then, Graham basically being as steeped as he is and, kind of the places that people are going with their money, we just want to get a sense of what people are buying and where they're headed in their thought processes. Give you some insights, maybe be the canary in the coal mine for anybody that wants to get a hold of something that may not be there in the short term, or help you find out if there is some way to better spend your money more efficiently so you don't have to cry more than once. But I think that's really where we're headed. JD, any thoughts on the show's overarching theme tonight?
I think it's just to expose what the builds we are personally, what Graham's seeing on the front of what people are doing, and just maybe giving some ideas, brainstorming a little bit about why we do what we do.
All right. Well, that being said, JD, why don't you start with your first build here?
So the first one that I actually wanted to start, I do have a 300 blackout build under my belt, and that's my first SBR that I have. And so I decided after shooting that one, I wanted a second one. I wanted to do a 5.56. So I got the tax stamp back. I believe it was 368 days. Sat on the tax stamp for about 2 months, and then finally decided to start doing something. So it's a Aero Precision upper and lower, and I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go with the stock. I looked at several things. I actually wrote a company I'm a pretty big fan of to get some more insight on one of their PDW stocks, and didn't hear back from them. So I was kind of, I'm going to say that customer service is a big thing to me. So if the customer service fails, and I understand things fall through the cracks every once in a while, but if it's like a consistent picture, then I kind of move away from that company for stuff. So one company that I've never had problems with when it comes to ordering parts or asking questions or getting the answers to the weird questions that I have is LWRC. And so on my 300 blackout, I do have their ultra compact stock kit. It is comfortable for me. I'm a bigger guy, bigger frame. So when I shoot, I always worried about the size of the stock not being comfortable, but actually it turns out it's really comfortable for me to shoot. So I'm going to pair that up on the Aero upper and lower. Faxton had a group buy going on the AR15.com forums. They were trying to get, I think it was 50. They needed 50 people to commit to buying before Faxton would produce a run of the barrels. I believe the original barrels were a pencil barrel at 10.3 inches. And so it got so popular that they actually decided to just make it, to add it to their regular product line and start producing them. So they canceled the group buy, and I found out that they decided to go with a 10.5 pencil barrel. So that's what I picked up for this SBR. Went to an SA adjustable gas block. Then for the handguard, use the F1 Firearms C7K contoured handguard. A little bit different look than in my other one, and just wanted to kind of try something a little bit different. I've been sitting on, and we had them on, gosh, probably a year and a half ago was the Wisconsin Trigger Company read.
Yeah.
Around there. And so I've played with it a little bit, and I've said I just want the right rifle for this to go into. So that will be the trigger. The Wisconsin Trigger Company setup will go into this SPR. And then I'm going to do the SX3 bolt carrier group and put it in there. And Graham and Stephanie helped me get to pretty much everything on the list except for the stock and the upper and lower ordered. So I'm waiting for Christmas to come as I receive a package from Northern Utah. Not quite sure what sights I'm going to run on it or what optic. That'll have to come a little bit later. It'll probably be an aim point or something like that.
So other than my influence, was there something that directed you at the LWRC ultra compact stock?
You know, when I had questions when I built the first one, like I said, customer service is a big deal. They answered their social media pretty quick. They answered emails pretty quick when I was asking about, you know, I just straight up, I said, I'm a big dude shooting these things. I want to make sure that it's comfortable for me. And they were quick to respond. So that kept them towards the top of the list. The stock, the setup that I really wanted, I had talked to Rita, had several interventions when I was like, I think I'm going to get this stock. And he's like, you're going to spend $399 for a stock. And so he talked me back from the ledge several times. And then when questions went unanswered and I couldn't really get a hold of anybody, and even calling, I got some runaround, I decided to just go with what I knew. And that is the LWRC. So
is there like a weight theme here? And you got a pencil barrel. You've got a pretty compact stock. Is the handguard a light handguard, or is that a pretty standard handguard? Are you trying to make it lighter, or is that just incidental?
The handguard's only, 3/4 of a pound. So it's not that, or actually, hold on, let me look at the stats here. It's just under a pound on the handguard. It doesn't really, it's going to host probably a Saker 556K. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's going to add a little weight to it. But that was one of the things on the 300 that I noticed, that the arrow handguard was a little bit heavier. And I don't know. The small compact package doesn't feel as balanced as a standard rifle when you're trying to balance out weight. So that may have been a subconscious effort to make it weigh a little less. And then I noticed the kids, even shooting that 300 blackout, the kids are like, Audrey sitting there looking like Rambo hip firing something as she's laughing like the Joker. But yeah, I think a little bit the weight played into it. I don't generally think about weight. But I think just the balance of the gun, I was going for a little bit more the weight at the back of the gun to counteract the suppressor that goes on the front.
All right. How about your next one, your 308?
So this one, I collect lowers, and I have a problem, and I'm trying to work that out. This starts.
My name is JD. I have a lower addiction.
I'm a lower holic.
A lower holic. And so I picked up. I have 4 308, bigger caliber lowers, upper combos, 2 arrows, and 2 New Frontier Armory setups. So I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with them, and because I haven't shot these for distance, I really haven't shot anything for distance, so I'm not sure I'm going to really like it. I wanted to do a really basic setup and use quality parts, so I went with an arrow builder set with the 15-inch handguard, the M5 upper and lower setup. I'm going to do a Magpul PRS, and then I'm using a Faxon 18-inch rifle length barrel that we're going to put on there. So I'm not exactly sure on the glass yet. And then pretty much everything else is going to be Aero Precision lower parts kit, Aero Precision, the nickel boron bolt carrier group. I did fork out a little bit more money for that, but just decided that just wanted to make a basic build. And I mean, it's going to be solid with Aero parts anyway, but anything I want to tune or adjust in the future, I'm just going to have to see how it goes, how it feels, how I enjoy shooting it. So this is where I'm kind of stepping into a longer range shooting where I'm not quite sure, A, if I'm even going to like it, or B, how I'm going to adjust and adapt to it.
Well, tell me about your next build.
So the next build is a 6.5 Creedmoor. I figured I have the space. Why not? You know, why not?
What's another caliber?
Yeah, what's that exactly? And then I'm told I need to build a different one. But you know, it's 6.5 Creedmoor. We saw a lot at SHOT Show this past January. Heard a lot about it. You see a lot about it. I don't know if it's still the new thing or the hot thing that's going on, but I like everything I read about it in distance shooting. So I wanted to give myself the platform of having a 308 and then also a Creedmoor. The Creedmoor is on also an Aero Builder set. I'm going to try the Luth AR adjustable stock over the Magpul PRS just to give me a little bit of diversity. And then the rest is probably going to be Aero parts and I think it's a 22-inch ballistic advantage barrel that's going to be in that one. So those are the three that I'm going to kind of piece together. The 308 really came in at the last minute when I started thinking, man, I was looking for Anthony's handguard and started finding other parts, realizing that I could actually probably pull off all three of these builds within the month of October, and then be able to shoot them and put some time on them and see if long range shooting is something I enjoy, or maybe it's something that I'm just not going to be into. Maybe I just want to do closer up stuff with 5.56 and below. So those are the three I've got in. The first one pretty in depth in how I wanted it to come out, and then the other two kind of just standard baseline to see what I'm going to like, what I'm not going to like. I think the stocks are pretty much the two big ones that I could find in the 308 6.5 area. Wouldn't you agree, Reed?
I would think so.
So I didn't want to get too crazy because I didn't want to have it affect how I enjoy shooting it. So probably go with some Vortex glass on top of both of them and see how I like it, see if I want to keep going in that, and then tune the rifles up, start at that baseline and then turn them into, monsters later down the road.
All right. So what about the future?
So Brownells came out with the A1 clone furniture. We talked about that a little bit last week. We talked to our guy at Brownells, and they are sold out. They're expecting a large order coming in. So I'm working with Brownells to order all the parts to build one of their M16 A1 clones. So that is in the future, something I'd like to do probably early next year. All of this is actually this disclaimer. All of this is to get me until my TPM MP5 SD comes through the ATF. Like if I had that right now, I probably wouldn't be doing any of this stuff. So I'm trying to kill this addiction. That, and then I want to build one of the side charging 9mm from New Frontier Armory, the stuff that they got, and add that to my collection. I'm also gonna have to buy another safe. So those are the things I'm looking forward to in the future, adding to the collection.
Interesting. Well, what else you have to add to your segment of the show, JD? What do you think is changing or evolving in your thinking from when you first started looking at builds, from when you built your 300?
I think I think this is going to be it in the short-barreled rifle arena. When all is said and done, I like my 300, and I'm pretty sure I'll like this one. I've got that MP5 coming, and those are all smaller rifles. And when I took it out to test fire it a couple weeks ago, the 300, I just realized that I didn't really appreciate the balance of having a smaller rifle. So I think I'm just going to be good with those two. I think that's how I've changed. I used to be, I was going to collect stamps and become a stamp collector. And I think that still will happen in the suppressor area. And I also kind of got an itch for a short barreled shotgun. But I think for the short barrel rifles, I think this is it. I think I'll have those three and just call it good at that, and then build some regular rifles. Because what I realized is I brought out my Daniel Defense M4 too, and as I'm shooting that, I realize I am much more comfortable shooting a full-size rifle, something with a 16-inch barrel, than I am shooting something with a 10.5 or an 11.5-inch barrel. It just doesn't work for me personally. I think each one of us are built differently, have different preferences, and maybe I hyped up the SBR stuff a little too much, and when I really got my hands on it, I realized, it's cool, but it may not be the lowers or iron sights at that level in my life.
Well, what I think is interesting is that you failed to recognize that a carbine is a short-barreled rifle in your hands.
Yeah. Well, I mean, after you're holding something that goes, the barrel ends at 10.5 inches, and you have a compact stock on it, and it's literally from one shoulder to the other shoulder against something that, when you have the stock fully extended, can go almost to your wingspan of your torso. It makes a difference for me. So it's not like I'm shooting something with a 18-inch or 20-inch barrel yet.
Well, with that being said, I think I can talk about a couple of builds I've put together and some of the things that have gone on in my thinking. So let's start with my 6.5 Grendel. So had an opportunity to get from Arrow a gray builder set that came with it was just the upper lower receiver. I got a blemish set because frankly I've never been able to find a set that wasn't that was blemished that I could actually find the problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I love blemish sets because they say they're blemished, and I look at them as I can't find anything wrong with it. So I think it's a great deal. But they had a handguard that was laying about because they completed their builder set series, and apparently this one just was an extra. So I got a complete set at a pretty good deal because part of it was blemished, and so I decided to build myself a new rifle, and I chose 6.5 Grendel as my caliber. So the builder set I thought was a really good start. Arrow is, of course, one of the manufacturers that I have a great deal of fondness for because their quality and the way that they put their stuff together. I got a Grendel barrel from Brownells as part of their custom barrel sets. And I can't remember who the manufacturer is that does the work for Brownells, but, reputable, not a flighty barrel manufacturer. So I was real comfortable with where that headed. And it came with a matched bolt, which to me I think was the critical component for my barrel choice because I wasn't interested in trying to track down a bolt and then buy a separate barrel. I wanted them basically to have been made in conjunction with each other. So that was kind of the driver there. And Brownells is, I think, still really, when it comes to some of their custom and branded AR gear, still very, very competitive when it comes to price in comparison to the quality. So I think you're getting a good quality for a fair price. I chose to have it mount a Saker from Silencer Co. So I put the trifecta mount on it. And to that end, I put a Cerac Ordnance low profile gas block on it so that I could use it to kind of tune the rifle for me. Because my intention is to shoot this Grendel suppressed at all times or whenever I shoot it. I went with Magpul Furniture. I went with Strike Industries low receiver accessories. So I was pretty thrilled with those. And I put a Geissele trigger on it. I think it's the 3-gun trigger. I'd have to go look at the specific one, but I think I've talked about it before. You know, Geissele, when it comes to their upper end triggers, I mean, still makes very, very good stuff. I'm very pleased with it. And, you know, I think probably for me, the most interesting component is something I found from Magpul, their M-Lock rail accessories. JD we're on a video conferencing deal. So JD, do you see this attachment here?
I do.
That is a piece of aluminum that allows me to mount that attachment on a standard tripod.
Huh.
And that created a very stable base from which to shoot. Now, of course, you cannot buy some, you know, jicky Chinese-made crap-tastic tripod because it's not going to withstand the forces or the weight that you're, you know, going to be mounting to it. But this is I think, a professional grade photography tripod. And since I don't have any cameras I'm into photography with, I decided to use it for my gun hobby. Anyway, so I think it was really kind of a departure from the way I have shot in the past to mount this on a tripod. But I was really kind of excited about that. It worked well, shot well, handled well. Nothing wrong with that at all.
What was the cost of that attachment or the?
You know, it's part of their M-Lock line. It is aluminum. So I think it's on the higher end, probably anywhere from $30 to $50, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Huh.
You know, I'm sure that you can either find a deal or, you know, find someone trying to rip you off, but comparison shop, find the best price. But the adapter is really very, very helpful. You know, I think that you can go out and I think it's, what is it? Is it the Hog mount? Have you seen those? It's a big cradle, aluminum. They have a pretty wide bed to lay the stock of a bolt gun into, and for that matter, pretty much any other rifle that you can field it. And it allows you to really kind of clamp that rifle down and put it on a tripod and shoot. Well, this essentially allows you to use what is an photography industry, standardized mounting plate in a host of very high quality tripods to do the exact same thing. So the difference being, I only had to spend, you know, $30, $40, $50 for this, as opposed to, I think it's somewhere around $200 to $300 for the Hog.
For the Hog saddle, yeah, it's about $300.
Yeah, and so, you know, they're different. This is not as interchangeable as that Hog saddle is, but we're getting to the same destination. So I think that the trade-offs more than warranted not having to spend $300 for it. So, you know, the Grendel, I took it out. I've got Troy irons on it. I haven't put an optic on it. I don't know where I'm headed in that direction yet. I have a clue. which will be I'll talk to you about in a subsequent. Well, in talking about my last build. So I've got some angles, some ideas on where I want to go with that. But right now I'm really excited about the rifle. I think it does a fine job for me. The next one that I built is the 357 SIG SBR, and there are some things that I put in the SBR that really kind of, I think they speak to some of the ideas and some of the things that are going through my mind when I'm looking at builds these days. And so the first is that, I never used to think that I would get a pistol caliber AR. I mean, I thought that was what an MP5 is for. You put pistol calibers in subguns, and of course, I'm not willing to commit the resources to buy a subgun. But when it comes to no, you just bought a toy. That is not a submachine gun because it's not a machine gun.
It's the closest I'm going to get.
It's
the closest I'm ever going to get.
So as soon as I'm ready to commit to the subgun, which I will, just to spite JD one of these days. And I always thought, look, if I'm going to get myself a pistol caliber, anything that isn't a pistol, it's going to be an MP5. But I became very fond of the 357 SIG chambering, and I found a way to get myself into that 357 SIG in an SBR. And so with that being said, I took what I had in terms of an existing SBR, an existing 357 SIG upper, married to a Lone Wolf Distributors, I think it's a G9 lower, and I basically redid the upper. So I got a quarter circle 10 357 SIG barrel, 7.5 inches. I got a YHM Yankee Hill Machine MR7 handguard because really in terms of M-LOK versus
Keymod.
Keymod, I'm drawing a blank. I started out being a very big fan of the Keymod and a very big fan of the accessories that were being made because of the number of companies that were out there making them. But then basically, I think two things happened. Number one, they were always sold out, whereas Magpul, their stuff is so prolific, it's always available. I found it hard to go to a place, either online or in person, where I couldn't find Magpul rail accessories. But the Keymod stuff was always such a bear to find. And then the next thing is that I found better kind of rail rail grips, rail covers, rail accessories that were available for the M-LOK as opposed to Keymod. And so I just have gradually gravitated towards the M-LOK, even though I don't think I was as fond of it in the beginning. Mostly it's because it's not backwards compatible with their old system, and I thought that was a rotten thing to do to consumers, to give them all this new M-LOK stuff, but then not give them a way to carry forward the stuff they've invested in already to a new system. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does it make me a freak because I still prefer the quad rail?
I don't know that it makes you a freak. Maybe out of touch, behind the times, not cool. You can go from there.
Well, never been concerned with any of those three. We'll do an NFA show on it.
There we go. So, the thing that I've kind of tended to in the last however many years it is my rails are getting thinner and thinner. You know, this one has a pretty large inside diameter, so it'll host a suppressor inside the interior of the rail, and so they're not some of these, very skinny handguards. But I used to have YHM, I think it was the Diamond Series quad rails. Those things are big. They're just big. And, I do not have enormous hands. I mean, I don't have tiny hands, but I just got to a point where didn't want all that real estate. And so I dialed it back. And these are much thinner handguards on the MR7. And I really do like them. Midwest Industries has always been one that I like as well.
I want to insert a conversation we had when it came to not to hijack the thing, but when you're talking about thinner handguards and things like that. Everybody has their own preference of things. When we were talking about handguards for my build, you and I, on a phone call, you're not a fan. I'm a fan of One Look. You're not a fan of One Look. Do you remember what we were talking about?
No, but I'm sure you're going to throw me under the bus with it.
No, it's not. It's just the different. It just shows the difference of, Reed influences a lot of my builds and things like that because of the wisdom that he has in his experience with firearms. One of the places we differ is, how the suppressor's mounted. I want, into the rail. My handguard is longer than my barrel, so I'm cool with the, it covering part of the suppressor and being, married back up in there. Reed's not. Reed wants the suppressor separate from the handguard. Now, to be able to shoot it without a suppressor, I have to get something in. I'm looking into like a flash can or a flaming pig or something that moves it out and in front away from the handguard, something that Reed doesn't have to do with his separated. But I just thought that added to the diversity of the builds because you like it, you like rock and roll. I like country. So,
yeah. And I think it's the idea to me that if I am going to commit to something in a build, I need the widest number of uses. That's what I strive for. And so to me, the idea of putting a muzzle device on a rifle that is hosted deeply enough in the handguard to where if you started shooting, you'd essentially melt your handguard with, the burning, or I guess, all of the exhaust and discharge from the round. To me, that seems like a very limiting part of that rifle, which puts you in a position where, like you are, JD, you have to find something to solve that problem, or you always have to shoot it with a can on. And to me, I think that that's kind of limiting. And it may be that I only have the one truly, I think, universal AR can for me, which is the Saker. And, if I had a Saker 5.56 and I basically committed to having a 7.62 and a 5.56, then, I would be able to have more than one can mounted to a rifle. And, perhaps I can have one on some of my rifles more on a more frequent basis. But, I just like to be able to, pull them out, get them out and use them without having to worry about whether or not I've got a can handy or, available to mount on it. So why would I limit myself in that scenario?
And see, I'm telling, when we discussed this, I said, I'm going to have dedicated cans for those two rifles so that they have 5.56K and probably the new Saker ASR on those two that are just dedicated for those two rifles, and then have other cans to use to rotate between other ones. Mm-hmm. My kid's college fund keeps getting smaller and smaller. It's smaller. Right now, we are hoping to like afford that preschool for college on the corner. That
Well,
the
so
half day preschool.
what's the thing? Have you guys decided that your kids are going to have like a steel cage death match to see which one of them gets access to the college fund first?
The funny thing is we'll have that match. We'll like tell them and we'll hype it up, but the winner is going to be really disappointed when I hand them $20 and say congratulations.
Congratulations! Here's the college fund.
Yeah.
Well, so on my SIG SBR, one of the things I came to find was an adapter that fit the thread pitch on the barrel that is essentially a 3-lug adapter. And because it doesn't have any of the traditional vents that you find in a compensator or even most of the flash hiders, it's just basically extends the barrel out just a smidge. I'd say probably 3/4 of an inch past my handguards. So interestingly enough, the handguard is just long enough to barely cover the edge of the octane, and still without the octane on it, it protrudes just past the handguard far enough to where I'm not concerned with any of the exhaust melting my handguard. And so I think it was purely incidental that it worked out this way, that I could do the very thing that JD wanted to do without having to risk the very thing JD has to risk.
I was going to pay you a compliment and say it wasn't just, accident. I was going to say you planned it that way, but then you had to go be rude. So it's all right.
It's honest. I had to be honest. And you know what? I think that's what I find a lot of times in my builds. I try to solve the problems that are of concern to me, and you take from that what ends up. I tried to solve the problem of having a suppressor on a SBR and not have the muzzle device melt my handguard. In doing that, I happened upon the mounting that allowed my suppressor to kind of rest just inside the inner diameter of my handguard. All accidental. And the 357 SIG is a pretty powerful round. We don't have a bolt that locks up, so it's direct blowback. There's no gas tube to worry about. There's no gas block to worry about. So that's out of the equation. But because of the force of the round, I have a really heavy spring and a really heavy buffer to have this thing cycle for me properly. And unfortunately, that means that I don't have a whole lot of choices with my buttstock. So this is a very traditional Magpul buttstock, and I'm using a primary weapon system, second generation enhanced buffer tube. And it's not the small scale I wanted with like a ultra compact stock from LWRC. But what are you going to do, right? You basically go in and you commit to the overarching items, and you're left with choices regarding the remainder that are driven by those primary themes. And so you want 357 SIG, you have to have the heavy barrel. Heavy spring, and that means that I have to have a full-size buffer tube, and that means that I'm limited in what kind of stock I can mount to it. Not a bad thing. It's just, the limitation of the decisions. I went with the Magpul backup sights. I haven't put an optic on it yet. I think at this point I probably have more rifles without optics than I have with optics. Probably a good thing I can shoot them. So
I just picture you like pulling out some whiskers out of your beard, throwing it up, checking the wind, looking at it. You don't even use iron sights anymore. You just picture them there. You project them on the rifle, you lock it in, and you nail it every time.
I'm just so used to putting the rifle where it needs to be that I can just stare off into space, and that's where the bullet's going to hit.
I mean, any guy who, turned down the role of Moses in the Ten Commandments, been around for a while.
Shut up. Shut up. So that leads me to this third build, and it's not an AR. So I want to just kind of point that out. It's a 6.5 Creedmoor. I built it on a Howa Action 24-inch barrel. It's beautiful. It shoots really well. Took it out to 500 yards and dinging steel consistently. Not a problem at all. I'm not sure how big the target was. I don't think it was much more than, I don't know, it's probably 12-inch to 15-inch plate at 500. So anyways, one of the things that really has always kind of galled me is, a $3,000 price tag for a good piece of glass. And so that kind of drove the principal decision I had to make. And I think I need to take just a moment here, JD. Can you mark the time?
Yeah.
See, I've got 51 minutes, 30 seconds.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. FYI, Graham's computer died. He's trying to get back on.
All right. Well, so I'm back at 53 minutes.
Okay.
So to me, the biggest problem I have with optics is the price. And yes, I understand the span of quality between, the low cost leader and, the $3,000 and $4,000 optics. I completely understand them. I've looked down the tubes of some of these higher end optics, and it's amazing. But the job can still be done with the lower power optics. And, I don't own a $3,000 rifle, so I don't feel the compulsion to put a $3,000 piece of glass on something that isn't that nice. But there are other options. There are shortcuts. There are compromises that can be made. And that can put you into some glass that really is going to solve the problem. So, I don't need to make a 2-mile shot, so I can make some compromises. I don't need to make a life or death shot, so I can make some compromises. What I decided to do was go with the fixed power optic, which eliminates the complexity of the various focal planes. It eliminates the complexity of the mechanics that allow you to zoom from 4 to 25 or 4 to 16 or 3x9 or whatever it is your optics capable of, and that brings the cost down significantly. And so I went with the fixed 20. I think a lot of people think that's too much. My aging eyes would disagree. I think it's just fine for me. But with that, I purposefully went with an optic that was going to get me that magnification that I wanted so I can reach out to 1,000 yards or so. And that was really the point of the exercise for me. It was to be able to reach out 1,000 yards. You know, the optic I bought, it's the SWFA Super Sniper. I bought a 20 power fixed, and it was what I thought a reasonable $300. You know, I looked through in my last range day a Night Force that was, you know, $1,000, several $1,000s more expensive than my scope. It was probably 2,300 to my 300, and it was a little clearer, but not so much that I'd pay $2,000 to be able to see that clearer. And I was still able to hit steel at 500 yards without a problem. And so it is a bit of a compromise. Well, I'll tell you, it's nice to be able to dial back your zoom so that you can get a wider field of view and really kind of understand what the lay of the land is downrange. But, you know, that's not why I built the gun. And so I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And, you know, I may very well find myself in a place where I'm going to put a couple $1,000 piece of glass on it and kind of take the next step up. And when I'm there, you know, we'll come and talk about how much that hurts. But, you know, so $300 was for me a very, very palatable for what I got. The point of bringing that, you know, to your attention is this. I am now, I think more than anything, of the opinion that I'm willing to put that kind of glass on my Grendel, you know, on a 308 that I have, you know, on my next future build, which will be a 243. You know, I'm willing to put a $300 piece of glass, you know, with the fixed 16 or 20 power optic on it at $300. I'm willing to do that all day, every day, if I can get the performance that the SWFA scope gave me. And so, you know, I think that that's the kind of, I don't know, consumer arbitrage that you can sometimes find yourself in. And, you know, Graham and you and I had a discussion about this in terms of triggers earlier before we started the show. You know, a standard trigger is pretty much, you know, junk metal. And, you know, it just barely meets the objective. And I mean, it's the minimum acceptable. But then there's plenty of stuff that comes on the market that tries to look like the minimal accepted. And it's worse. It's junk. It's crap. So as we discussed, you pay $15 more and you get a, what is it, the QMS that's $15 more, Graham?
Yeah. Yeah, right about that. 15, 18 maybe.
And that's an exceedingly high quality trigger in terms of the commitment to what the trigger should be as a finished product in terms of metallurgy and quality and components going into it. So for $15, you can completely eliminate any guesswork as to whether you bought crap or just, you know, the bare minimum acceptable. And so for me, you know, buying a $300 optic that's got a fixed 20 power made by SWFA allows me to get into that zone for a couple $1,000s less than the things that are the starting point for the higher end. And, you know, like I said, you make compromises. You don't get certain things. It's fixed. The glass is not as clear, but it tracks real well. And the glass is good enough. And so, you know, I think to me, my objective is to always find those opportunities when I commit my money. Now, there are places that, I don't take shortcuts. And, I won't compromise in those places. But with the parts, I think there are places you can go where you can be really efficient, really effective with your spending dollars and not break the bank.
So I'm going to ask you, what are give me two things that you won't compromise on?
So I won't compromise on a suppressor. I know that there are a lot of people that are, I would say they're manufacturing consumer NFA items to have fun with. And that's fine. But my thought is that I want someone to be able to use this, 1,000 rounds from now, 10,000 rounds from now, 100,000 rounds from now, because it was built and over-engineered like nobody's business. The other thing is, I think pistols. My pistols are, for the most part, higher end, higher cost pistols. What is it? The High Point, that's the $150 pistol.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind. I cannot understand why anybody would spend $150 on that pistol.
Hey, they run. They run.
I understand. What was it? I used to have an old, gosh, I can't remember the car. It was a rattling death trap with a 4-cylinder engine and 4-wheel drive.
Studebaker. He had a Studebaker.
No, shush. But it was a coffin on wheels. And I was just in the beginning of my post-Marine Corps, trying to get an education, trying to survive days, and this was what I could do. It was a Subaru Justy. If you look at those kind of 1980s something, 90 something, it shouldn't have been imported. It was nothing but a death trap. It was a coffin on wheels. You get into an accident, they just throw the whole damn thing in the hole.
Hey, don't trash on the Justy. We used to have one. I rode in the back window all the time. 6 kids. That was the only spot I had. I was one of the youngest. It's all good.
It explains so much about Graham now. I mean, how many times did y'all get rear-ended, Graham? I mean, be honest.
0 in that car for sure. I'd be dead. I wouldn't be here right now.
See, Graham knows. He knows. The point is that there are some things that you can buy, and you look at it and you're like, what the hell did I just do? And I just don't know why you'd go there. It's not even a cry once, buy once, cry once. I mean, I don't understand. Why would you go and buy, canned food that has the top bulging out because there's salmonella or botulism in it? Why would you buy that? Why would you set yourself up for that? And there are just things that I think you should avoid, and I think most people would agree, and I guess reasonable minds can disagree, but good God, a High Point, what the hell? I'm sorry. I'm literally, well, what are you thinking?
But if you only have $150 and you need protection,
Trojan.
I'm telling you what, a Louisville Slugger will do more than a High Point. And you know what? With a Louisville Slugger, I can get a lot of them for $150 and have them all over the house. All over the house. I could have one in every room.
I don't know. Bats are pretty expensive these days.
Well, maybe I'm thinking about $1968.
Yeah, maybe, or 1946.
I think Graham needs to get off the train.
No, I listened to the show. I just follow with JD.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You got the JD Regional Band show. All right.
I would say in the AR, the thing not to skip on is probably the bolt and the barrel. For me, is I won't. I mean, suppressors and pistols.
Oh, you're talking about AR stuff?
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
I'll go with you on pistols too because I buy H&Ks. So I mean,
Well, they're just things that you shouldn't compromise on. When it comes to a rifle, I would agree that the bolt you shouldn't compromise on. The barrel, I think that there is an outside limit to how many compromises you can make, but you can make a really decent barrel for not very much. I think FN can attest to that. They make some really high quality barrels that don't have, just tons and tons of, space age technology in them. It's kind of circa World War I, World War II technology, and they're perfect. Bolts. I don't think you should skimp on bolts, and I don't think you should skimp on sights. Whether it's an optic, I think you can make some compromises there as long as you have a good quality set of irons. If you have a quality set of irons, you can be on target anytime, any day. There is a bottom threshold, I think, with optics. I mean, look at Vortex. They make some really great stuff for not very much, right?
Yeah. You get the bang for your buck there.
But you don't have to break the bank, and you are compromising from the standard. You're not buying a Trijicon, you're not buying an Aimpoint, you're not buying an EOTech, but then again, you're not forking over the dough that those require. And so I think that that's a fine compromise. I don't think the same is true of backups. Look at your baseline, Magpul backup iron sight, the polymer ones, and compare it to the Chinese crap. I mean, that's some junk. Why would you even take the cost-effective route? Because it's not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to disappoint you. So I think irons, those are things that you shouldn't compromise on.
So, Graham, I'm going to ask you for the two things that you wouldn't compromise in an AR build.
I would say bolt carrier and trigger for me. Those are the two things that have screwed me in the past.
What? Talk about triggers.
Triggers. Oh, man. I've had a lot of really garbage triggers in the past. And, ones that break probably 12 pounds by the time you get them through really gritty, really nasty AR triggers. And I've switched to, QMS is the lowest thing we run at the shop. We don't sell anything with anything lower than the QMS trigger. But in my rifles, all of my triggers are closer to $200 or more in all of them, because I've noticed a huge accuracy curve as far as triggers go. I mean, that messes me up. I don't have very good fundamentals, so I don't need a trigger working against me. I spend as much money as I can there. If I got a $400 rifle, I'll put a $200 trigger in it on top, and I'll be happy, But yeah, I think, and bolt carriers for me, some of them just don't like certain guns. I run them and just especially in builds. In a gun you buy off the shelf, they're basically set. They're ready to go. They've tuned them. But with guns that you're building, some bolt carriers just don't work. And they work, but you got to over gas them or under gas them. So yeah, for me, it's spend money there. I spend as much money on my bolt carrier and my trigger as I do on the rest of my build on a lot of them, honestly. So It's interesting to watch.
So here's from your earlier story, you told us off the air about an experience you had with ammo. Do you guys compromise? Would you guys compromise on the ammunition you buy to run through your ARs?
That's a tough one because not any, but most of your ammunition manufacturers, any of your bulk manufacturers, there's a risk, right? They're running 10,000 rounds before they check a round. So bad things can happen in 10,000 rounds. There's some manufacturers that check every 100 rounds, and typically you're pretty safe with those, but you're going to pay 75 cents, $100 a round for 5.56. So I think sometimes on some of my builds, I'll sacrifice it. Let me just break it down like that to answer your question. Yeah, on my cheap guns, I'll sacrifice money on the rounds over quality, but on my good guns, no. I mean, my precision rifle, I don't think it's seen a round go through it that was less than 75 cents a round ever in its whole life, because it was an expensive gun and it's made to run tight groups, and I don't want to shoot it out. I mean, the problem we had that we talked about off air was a mainstream ammo manufacturer, and there happened to be a round that was not crimped well enough, and as it hit the feed lip, it pressed that projectile in just a little bit too far. And as most people know, those cases are full, right? On a 5.56 223 case, if you reload, you fill them. If you press that in just a little bit past where it's supposed to be, you're way over pressured.
Mm-hmm.
Rifles blow up. This rifle blew up. I'm the customer is a friend of mine, actually, and I'm so glad he didn't get his face shot off. It was scary. If it wasn't a billet upper, it wasn't a heavy duty billet upper, he would have been hurt. He would have hurt seriously. Yeah. So it's hard to say. You should be able to trust the big name brands. And I'd say generally you can. This happened to be an exception. It happens. It happens. In their defense, it was about a year and a half ago when ammo was still flying off the shelves, right? So they're running at 120% capacity to just try and keep everybody in ammo. So probably more things slip through QC than do these days. But I don't know. Yeah, I've bought cheap ammo, but I've never bought 30 cents ammo. I've always spent at least over 50 probably for everything I've ever bought.
Yeah. I think for me, my first lesson came with some steel-cased ammunition, and it wasn't your standard Russian-esque stuff. It was a in-house brand for a sports outdoor sporting goods retailer, and it fired well. It ejected, or it tried to. But essentially it failed to eject because there's something about either the amount of powder, or it was undergassed or something. And I'd put standard brass ammunition in there, and the thing would just cycle like a grandfather clock. I mean, the thing was just perfect, but whatever the steel case stuff was, it just wasn't doing the trick. And I took it back. They accepted it. I explained, and they were gracious. They took it back.
Wow.
Missing however many rounds it was, because it was a big bulk purchase, and I was very pleased with that. But to me, that was kind of the first lesson in not compromising. And here's the second lesson. I went out with a box of steel cased 357 Magnum projectiles, and I never would have thought that I would have a problem with a wheel gun and steel case.
Right.
But I did. I fired the first round, didn't have a problem, and fired the second round, and it locked up because the case came back and basically got lodged in the cylinder, not quite deeply, seated as it probably should have been.
Mhm.
I had to force the cylinder, out of the force it open and drive a dowel to get the two rounds out because they were locked up in the cylinder.
Oh wow! So it had pressed back into the frame.
Yep.
Oh man.
And it had expanded inside the chamber to the point where it wouldn't release. and I'm thinking to myself, well, I am never buying this stuff again.
Right. That cured you for life.
Exactly. And I never would have thought I would have had to worry about steel case and a wheel gun. But and it was two different chambers. Both of them, the case was locked up inside there. I mean, I think it's phenomenally weird. So that was it. I've been cured.
Very interesting.
I'll never buy another. Mm-mm.
I think the only steel case I ever ran through was my Howa Action 308, and it ran like a dream. I ended up getting a bunch of steel case on trade. I thought, okay, what the hell, we'll throw it through. It's fine. I got to break in the barrel somehow, so I did it. No problems. I've never run any through an AR. I've had customers run it through an AR, and some of them get away with it, no problem. Tighter tolerances, any quality, like high-end match grade even barrels, they don't like to run in it. They're too tight tolerances. And the lacquer buildup, maybe, I don't know if they don't factor that in because they lacquer coat those steel cases. Maybe that was, not everybody does, but a lot of them do. Maybe that's the problem. I don't know. That's crazy.
Well, and I mean, certainly the brass is a softer metal. The expansion characteristics under pressure are different.
Sure.
It could be any number of, compounding factors that together just make them more finicky. Anyways, so Graham, why don't we talk about your
squirrel?
Squirrel. Why don't we talk about your builds, Graham? So let's talk about some of the things that you like.
Well, let's see. I guess the most recent is last week I milled out my first 80% lower. I didn't put that in the show notes, but that was a lot of fun. I've never done it before. I've sold a lot of 80% lowers, and it was a blast. I'm not going to lie. If you haven't done it, do it. It's fun.
So tell me, did you take the in-home router drill press approach, or do you have more sophisticated equipment accessible?
Well, I do have more sophisticated equipment accessible. However, I took the drill press hand router approach myself, less programming time. And you know what, with how I thought it was going to be a little bit more complicated. I'm a craftsman by trade. And so I wasn't worried, but I knew it was going to be intense. I got into it. It wasn't that intense. I used the 80% arms Gen 1 jig. I'd like to get their Gen 2 jig just to try it out because it looks a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more complete. But the Gen 1 did great. I didn't have any complaints. Everything worked out just fine. And it probably took me, I'm fairly meticulous, and I like to take my time, whether or not it's supposed to take my time, if I'm not on the clock anyway. So I think it took me 4.5 hours probably to mill one out. Okay. Now switching between the drill press and the router, it was fun. I recommend it highly to anyone that wants to do it. Yeah, good time. It's after you've built a rifle, the next step is milling your own lower. And I've told so many people to go do it, but I figured I have no plans for a build for this lower. I just thought, you know what? I got to build one of these lowers because I tell so many people to do it. I got to do it myself so I can say how much fun it is and maybe give a little insight, although I can't help anybody or anything because it's not legal. But yeah, no, do it. If you guys haven't built one, build one. It's fun.
Well, I've got a couple of receivers and a jig, so I've got that in the horizon. But here's the thing that I've got a question about. And, I guess it's the purest not the purist, it's the completionist in me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could stand to have an uncoated 80% lower receiver on any gun I had. You know, just shiny metal would just pick at me and pick at me and pick at me. I just couldn't stand it. So did you coat yours? Did you do something to finish that out?
I probably will. I've got equipment to Cerakote, and I've got some black, so I probably will tape it off and Cerakote it. I've got a few friends, also clients, that bought 80% lowers, and they used an aluminum blackening agent.
Okay.
So it wasn't as good as parkerizing or bluing or Cerakote or anodize, but it for the perfectionist in you, it turns it black, so it puts it out of sight, out of mind, right? So I mean, it's all interior. Once the pins are in, once the safety's in, you don't even notice the difference as long as you do a good job in the milling process. But yeah, they just, I think on Amazon they bought a little bottle of aluminum blacking agent. It's just a chemical reaction. Just put it on there, turns black, good to go. And it does put a little sealant in there a little bit. It weathers that surface so that it doesn't corrode quite as quickly. Okay. So but yeah, to answer your question, I'm going to Cerakote it probably, because I'm the same way. I can't stand having rough stuff sitting around. So,
I'll tell you, I have a in-law who lives in Colorado, graduate of the Trinidad's gunsmithing school, and has the equipment to make his own barrels. And every rifle in his house is homemade. And every rifle that's leaning against a door jamb or up against a wall or off the couch or whatever it is has a barrel that looks as though it just came off of the lathe.
Oh, wow.
The actions are all, bare metal. He doesn't blue them. He doesn't coat them. I'm sure he oils them. They don't look rusty. He maintains them. But I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I wouldn't be able to stand that. I'd have to have everything coated. I'd blue it or I'd Cerakote it. I couldn't deal with it.
I love it. That's cool.
All right. Well, what else you got up here, Graham?
So my most recent build is not complete yet. It's an SBR. Started with an F1 firearm skeletonized receiver set. I bought it last Black Friday. So I'm following JD's footsteps. I know how to buy them. I do not know how to put them together, at least not for myself. I've been accumulating parts. I used quite a few Sequence Precision parts. I've got a 9-inch handguard, and I love their safety switch. They've got a 45 degree, and then you flip the barrel and it's a 90 degree. It's all billet cut. The switch itself is billet cut. You can get it in several anodized colors. It runs on all of my rifles. Honestly, I don't run anything but a Sequence switch. And I also do the Sequence button, the mag release button. On that rifle, I ended up running a Troy mag release. So it's an ambidextrous release. It's got a little lever on the outside of the gun, on the opposite side of the gun, for any lefties that may want to use my rifle. And then I ran, an LWRC ultra compact stock like JD. It's a great stock. I mean, it's short. It's shorter than a lot of your standard 6-position stocks, but for an SBR, it's ideal in my opinion. It compacts really small, and it comes out to a comfortable shooting length as long as you don't have a really high angle on your grip. It's really comfortable. I also used an LWRC charging handle, the ambidextrous charging handle. If you guys haven't used those, treat yourself. It's awesome. I've got one. It's hard to see, but it's got the pins, the pivot pins on the ambidextrous are huge. They're not a roll pin. It's big. It's probably 3/16 of an inch. They don't wear out. They don't bend. They don't anything. It's really positive feel. Love that charging handle. I can't even tell you. And it's cheaper, probably $10 cheaper than, say, the Raptor, which is probably our highest selling charging handle is the Raptor charging handle. LWRC takes the cake. And if you ask me,
Yeah, I tend to put that Raptor in mine.
yeah, it's a
I
great
like
one.
it.
People don't lie. We sell way like 4 times probably more Raptors than any other charging handle. But that one, as far as utility goes, it's sleek looking. It looks closer to stock, even if you want kind of a quote unquote sleeper gun or whatever. I don't know. I like the feel of it. The Raptors are great. I've had them. I've run them. On this rifle, I thought I'm going to go with LWRC and have loved it. It's sweet.
Well, and I'm looking at the top of this Raptor, and you're right. I mean, it's got 2 roll pins in here.
Yeah, it's roll pins.
And there is a night and day difference between what you have in that LWRC. That's remarkable. I don't think I've seen the LWRC.
It might be overbuilt for the sake of overbuilding.
Well, but when was that a crime?
Right. So I guess I should back up. When I'm building rifles now, I build for sex appeal, not necessarily like sex appeal and function. Like they're high on my priority list. Budget's usually not in my repertoire, but yeah, give that LWRC a try. You won't be disappointed. It's a little different than the Raptor. It functions a little bit different. It feels a little different, but you'll love it, and you'll never wear it out. Not that you'll wear out the Raptor. I don't know if you'll ever will wear out those roll pins, but hey, the added security of triple the thickness, why not?
Oh yeah.
Why not? So, I ran SX3 bolt carrier group like JD did. It's Teflon coated exterior, chrome lined. They're actually a rebranded LWRC bolt. We bought them from LWRC, had them Teflon coated, and man, they're sweet. We have them done by Black Ice Coating, so if you've got one and you want it done, you can send it to those guys and they'll do it up for you. They're awesome. I have any moving part on my gun that's not in the trigger group that I feel like I want to be slick and don't want to have to worry about if I've got too little oil on it or whatever. Black ice it, get it coated. It's the Teflon. It's phenomenal. What else do I have on that thing? Let's see. I think I'm missing a grip, a barrel, gas block, gas system. So the last thing on my list, I guess, is a CMC Landtac trigger, 3.5 pound curved trigger. I really like that trigger. I've run it in my other rifles. I'm not a fan of the flat trigger. A lot of people love it. I don't know if you guys have had any experience with it. I hate it with every ounce of my soul. I cannot do the flat triggers at all. So I do the curved trigger. It's really nice. Single stage, no creep, no over travel. It breaks. It feels weird shooting it because it's one of the best non-tunable triggers that I've owned, honestly, especially single stage. Really like that trigger. Other than that, I think it's about it on that rifle. I think it's going to get a 10.5-inch barrel. Probably going to go with the Faxon pencil barrel just for the sake of a little bit of weight. It's already a fairly light build. Not super duper light, but it's it's worthy of trying to keep light, not going crazy. Although on Friday, like the 2nd or 3rd of the month, whatever it is, whenever this comes out, I will be getting a Dead Air Sandman S suppressor for it, a 7.62, and they're fairly heavy. They're about a pound, so it's going to weight that thing down a little bit, but it'll be worth it, I think, for not going crazy on it.
I kind of wonder with there's the 3 trends, I guess, kind of meeting in conjunction with each other. So the first is SBRs.
Yeah.
Really easy to put together an SBR in terms of, fill out the form, pay your fee, get your stamp, you're done. And then you go out and get a little bit of, engraving work on your lower and you have an SBR. So it's not like a technically difficult thing to do.
Sure.
Then you've got this trend towards really light. And I see that more and more kind of in the SBRs because experimenting with lighter materials, experimenting with relief cuts, and just, whatever it is to take mass off of receivers, mass out of bolts, mass out of any component you can to get as light as possible. And when you have an SBR, you certainly taken mass out of the barrel because you've cut, 11 inches off the darn thing.
Yeah, at least.
And then if you start looking at like pencil barrels and, 7 to 10 inches, that's that much lighter. But then you have all of this weight reduction, and then you put on it a suppressor. Which is on, the furthest tip of the firearm. They're usually pretty robust in terms of construction so that they can handle the extreme of caliber, the extreme of rate of fire, the extreme of whatever. And I mean, the extreme of exhaust gases because you're putting it on a short barrel.
Sure.
So, at what point do you have a can that weighs as much as the firearm itself sitting out there on the furthest tip? And how does that affect your enjoyment? I don't think I've built anything where that is an issue, but I wonder who has. Is that a problem?
My question is it possible? If you've got a tiny little rifle that you got to suck clear up in, this little SBRs, typically they have shorter stocks. You got them really small. You're packing a big punch. You're packing a rifle caliber punch, and then you hit it, and it goes thump, thump, thump. Whose face does that not bring a smile to, Reed? I'm telling you, it's.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. And I'm not complaining.
Sure, no,
I wouldn't turn one down. I'm just saying. It's kind of like, have you seen that guy that makes the cartoon swords or anime swords?
Yeah.
I haven't.
Oh, they're hysterical. I mean, it's like, 100 pounds of blade sitting on like a 10-pound handle. The guy can't swing the thing. They're hysterical. That's why they're in stupid cartoons, because they don't exist in the real world.
It's impractical.
So,
hey,
yes.
If you're ever buying guns because it's practical, you bought the wrong gun. Reed, just so you know. You don't have the disease. You have, what's the word I'm looking for, JD? It's something else. It's not the disease. The disease is impractical, period.
That is true. I don't know that there's anything that I own that is practical.
Right?
Yeah, no, not a thing.
My Glock 43, my carry gun. That's the only practical gun I own. It's a practical gun and a practical holster, and that's it. Everything else is for fun.
See, I wouldn't even say that my carry gun is practical. It's a SIG P239. So
okay, yeah, not practical.
It's got some heft to it.
Yeah.
But then again, if I ran out of ammunition, I could pistol whip somebody. You tell me what you could do with that Glock.
No doubt. Not a lot. Not a lot. I could use it as a mini boat anchor, maybe.
So, gentlemen, I'm going to have to call this episode 221 XLT because what are we on the recorder there, Reed?
Well, it looks like the recorder died. So good thing we have a YouTube
backup.
My fault. All my fault.
See, nobody actually knows that for 25 minutes, the battery on Graham's computer died. His wife had to run out to her work, grab the charger, run back, plug him back in, and then he just fit seamlessly back in the show. Nobody knew that he stepped out. Graham was just very quiet while we were discussing our builds.
I was just silently contemplating everything you were saying. I was sweating bullets the whole time. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Last time I was on the show, I derailed it completely. This time, I just left halfway through.
And then we tried to have Stephanie from Staley Shooting Supply on about 2 weeks ago, and her excuse was like, the baby's trying to come early. So I mean, between computer died and baby's trying to come early, you SX3 crew, you guys are kind of a pain sometimes to get on the show.
We're a pain to get on the show, and once we get on the show, we're still a pain. We're just all the way around. It's all good.
I think we have to send out some technical experts your direction.
Oh, please do.
Maybe do this in person with our own recording equipment.
That's why we do ours in person. We all sit in the room together and yell at each other until the batteries die, and then we call that an episode.
Well, we are going to get together with them at SHOT Show and sit down and record.
All I can say is buckle up.
Well, here's the question for you guys. Are you coming to Dallas for the NRA show?
Ooh, maybe. It's a hard maybe. Yeah. Stephanie, with having the baby, everything's rough for the next 6 months until the baby's old enough she can leave.
I just hear excuses.
Yeah. I know.
Put that thing in a sling
and throw it on her back.
Get
if I had a company car, right? Little QD baby. No, if I had a company card, be there in a heartbeat. So far, she doesn't trust me enough. I don't know if this face is not trustworthy. So,
well, maybe just have her create an employee expense reimbursement plan.
Ooh, I like that.
That way, she can go through all of your receipts and say, "No, Graham, we don't pay for strip clubs. No, Graham." This bar tab looks like it's your beverage of preference, and there's far too many. No, we're not going to do that. Oh, okay. Well, this was a company dinner. We'll pay for that.
We'll pay for that. $180 in whiskey in 20 minutes? No way.
Well, man, hey, thanks for coming on the show. Going so long, we'll move the feedback to the next week, Reed, and get us something for next week. But if you haven't,
we'll get batteries for next week.
We'll get new batteries for the recorder. So you may notice a difference in the quality from our normal show because we take it from the YouTube backup, but the show is going to be there. Send us any questions or comments, ar15.podcast@gmail.com. Subscribe and listen to the AR15 podcast for free on iTunes or Stitcher. Leave us a review. Share your pics with us on Instagram and on Facebook, facebook.com/AR15podcast. Check out the shirts. They are available through the Patriot Patch Company. You can go to firearmsradio.tv, click on the AR15 podcast. You will find the link there. Or you can go to patriotpatch.co and click on collections, and you will see our stuff there. So with that, episode 221 XXXLT, and this one almost 2 hours. I'm thinking we've been going at it. So thanks for listening, and Reed, final words.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good night.